Oh, hey, friend who doesn't have an online presence, how are ya? Going out of town for work. Take care of your cat? Can I put it in the video? Okay, I'll credit him. You know, this probably would have fit better if you showed up while I was working on the September video. Starting things off, there's a fun little meetup between Akechi, Kasumi, and ourselves. I'm really glad that Kasumi is starting to more properly integrate into the grander narrative, even if it's not by much. I wouldn't say that they're dangling keys in our faces like they did that first month and some change, since we actually get scenes that feel substantial to some degree, but she still sticks out like a sore thumb so far. Time for the Pre-Palace Confidants, and along with it, the final winner of the Confidant Polls Losers Bracket. The first time around, the winner was Torinosuke Yoshida, while the winner of the second poll was Sadayo Kawakami. But who ended up making a comeback and making out as the third and final confidant? Tai Takemi, the emo goth punk Dr. Mommy. Let's give her a good old cheer, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I see how it is. All of you prefer Kawakami, the mommy with the maid outfit? Well, screw you! I'm keeping my goth punk emo mommy all to myself. Anyway, let's get into it. I started by hitting rank 4 with Yusuke, then got rank 3 with Takemi. And that's it! The story is hijacking my ability to play the game. I can't do anything but go to sleep. Ever since the calendar system was introduced, this has been a common complaint. I understand sometimes the story needs to move forward, but there are unreasonably long stretches of nothing but. From what I recall, Royal is better about giving you freedom to do things, but not so much here. P5 is the most infamous of the trilogy in this regard, and as a result, Morgana gets a ton of hate and gets memed on a lot, but really I feel like it's just a mix of who it is telling you can't play. P3 and 4, it was Makoto and you telling you it's bedtime, but now it's someone else telling you. It's less, my character is tired, and more, I'm being told I'm not allowed. Regardless, it's an annoying quirk with the series, and I doubt it will ever really go away, so we just gotta deal with it. Just want to give a quick shout out to the guy who sits behind Joker. There's no way he doesn't see Morgana hanging out in that desk every single day at school, even during finals. Don't know his name or his face, but he's a bro all the same. Following finals, we start our summer break off with a newly added event in Royal, hanging out at the summer festival with Ryuji and Yusuke. Overall, it's a fun chance to hang out with the guys, though beyond the truly cringeworthy line, it's not as memorable as the park cleanup in May. The real juicy bits come afterwards when we run into Kasumi outside of the festival. We finally start to really dig into more of her character. Up to this point, she's been talking about her gymnastics meet, how she's been chosen to represent the school and the stress it's putting her under. Now that it's come and gone, she ends up feeling disappointed in herself for not performing to the best of her abilities. While she used to have her little sister to support her, her recent passing left her with not only carrying the weight of the expectations placed on her, but the weight of both her and her sister's dream. Honestly, I can sympathize with her. I don't have a dead sibling I'm trying to live with, but I've definitely had the experience of being extremely anxious about how I'll perform. Hell, I feel this basically every time I make a video. Sometimes I'll come away feeling very satisfied with what I did, while other times I feel like despite doing my best, I ended up just phoning it in. I guess you could call it imposter syndrome, but it's not exactly prevalent. I really like where the game seems to be taking Kasumi. I'm really curious to see where her story goes from here, even if I already know the big twist. Moving on to the Fireworks Festival from the original game, part of me would have liked this to have been expanded upon a bit more alongside the hangout the day prior, but as it stands, it's weirdly one of the more memorable scenes for me, which is ironic because I literally said what the hell the second Haru showed up. That same night, it's reported that the international hacker group Medjed has posted a message on their website challenging the Phantom Thieves. Do not speak of your false justice. We are the true executors of justice. Stop stealing our thunder. Seeing as it's not known who is even in Medjed, we start investigating. During this, Joker is contacted by someone calling themselves Alibaba. They say that in exchange for stealing someone's heart, they will assist us in our conflict with Medjed. While they wait for Alibaba to contact them again, they learn that Medjed has declared victory over the Phantom Thieves, threatening to attack anyone who continues to support the group. We also receive a letter in the mail with a blank calling card in it, the envelope lacking a stamp, suggesting whoever did this delivered it themselves. The next day, we're contacted by Alibaba again, demanding to know when we plan to steal the heart and threatening to report us to the authorities if we don't. We tell him that he needs to, actually give us a name if he wants us to do it, so he finally gives us one. Reluctantly. Our target is someone named Futaba Sakura, and Alibaba disconnects before we can ask anything else. On then realizes our new target shares a last name with the man whose cafe we're staying in. Sojiro Sakura. When asked about Futaba, however, Sojiro gets defensive. Later, we arrive home to find Sai threatening Sojiro's custody of his daughter in order to extort him for something. Cognitive science, psychotic breakdowns. I don't know, he still refuses to tell us anything. Alibaba contacts us again, even more furious than the last. When we ask to meet up so we can fully discuss things instead of doing this dance, Alibaba just calls it off. He says he can't do it and rescinds everything, including the threat to report us. Seeing as Medjed hasn't done anything since their second post, we've decided to just let it go and move on. Good news is that Ryuji was able to make a good chunk of change out of the suitcase part of Kanashiro's treasure, so we make plans for sushi. While talking with Sai, Akechi suggests the idea that the Phantom Thieves changing someone's heart and the mental shutdown cases might actually be related, potentially being done by the same people. When we coincidentally run into him, he tells us how he's joined the team investigating the Phantom Thieves, while also implying he suspects us. He also mentions how Medjed has made a third post. This time, they announce their plans to attack Japan's economy for their continued support of the Phantom Thieves. With no other options and less than a month before the attack, we discuss how to get back in contact with Alibaba. After proposing a few questions about him, Makoto hypothesizes that Alibaba might actually be Futaba herself. Trying to meet with her directly, they head to Sojiro's place, only to end up scaring her. It's then Sojiro finally comes clean, revealing that Futaba was the daughter of his friend Wakaba. She raised Futaba as a single mother before committing suicide right in front of her. With no one to turn to, Sojiro took her in as her guardian. At first, she was quiet and severely depressed, blaming herself for her mother's death. She eventually started to open up to Sojiro, but a few months ago, she started to see and hear things. Because of it, she locks herself in a room and refuses to come out. The gang checks to see if Futaba even has a palace in the first place, and she does. After talking with her through the door, we figure out her keywords and make our way inside. There, we find a giant pyramid in the middle of the desert. Funnily enough, not only are there no enemies, but we aren't even seen as a threat since our Phantom Thief outfits aren't on. However, that changes once Futaba starts having an episode in the real world, making Shadow Futaba see us as a threat and shutting us out. We retreat for the day, our mission starts proper, and for some reason I get a tutorial about doing side quests and mementos 3 months after unlocking them? Sure, I guess. Now it's time for this video's extra topic, and it's something I've actually been sitting on for a while. Persona 5's openings. Wake up, get out there for the base game, and colors flying for Royal. Considering how the openings to Persona games are so integral to the experience, I feel it would be remiss not to talk about it. Wake up, get out there clears. Not only is the animation just way better, but I also just vibe with the song more. I will say that Flying Colors absolutely feels like a celebration of Persona 5. However, I think that might be part of the problem. Rather than acting as an updated secondary opening meant to help set Royal apart from the original game, while also trying to get new players excited to play what is ostensibly the definitive version of P5, it feels more like it was made almost exclusively for people who played the first game. Like the opening exists more to go, yeah, Persona 5 was great, huh? Get ready to play it again! Emphasis on again. Wake up, get out there had this beauty and sleekness to it that made everything cool and a fantastic initial hook for anyone, whether they be new or returning. Not to mention the animation quality was impeccable, thanks in large part to the direction of Sayo Yamamoto. One leg up Flying Colors has, however, is that it much better utilizes Makoto and Haru. In the original opening, it feels like everyone but those two has their personality and or thing properly represented. Ryuji is wild, honest fun, Yusuke is a somewhat pretentious artist, and Futaba is the computer girl. Makoto and Haru, however, get no attention whatsoever, appearing only once in Futaba's sequence where she is very blatantly the focus of the shot. Not to mention, what little we see of Haru here clashes with her actual personality. Here, she looks sassy, almost uninterested in what's happening, But when you finally meet her in game, she's neither of those things. To be fair, the reason why this is because this intro was made before Atlas had worked out who Haru, Makoto, and even Futaba were going to be. That's why Haru and Makoto just sit there and you can't get any kind of personality out of Futaba beyond good at computers. Flying Colors is a much better representation of what the characters' personalities actually are. The only thing I outright hate about the new opening is the Kasumi sequence. The idea is fine, but it's so jerky and the camera is just flying all over the place as opposed to being locked to something. As soon as it zooms in, it's impossible to tell where the camera is even supposed to be within the scene. It feels like the background is spinning in one direction while Kasumi spins in another. It's disorienting and does not look good to me. It's like they tried to do their own version of the ice skating from the original opening, but didn't know how to frame it. Last thing I want to mention about the openings is that both are kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of handling the depiction of the traitor. In Flying Colors, rather than incorporating them into the rest of the animation, they're the only character aside from Kasumi that's given an isolated focus, making them come off as just as important as her and making it really obvious who it is. While you could say it's because they have a special relationship with Joker, I'd argue that that relationship being focused on alone makes it obvious that they're the traitor. This is practically the exact opposite of Wake Up, Get Up, Get Out There does, as that opening just excludes them entirely, ironically making it really obvious who it is. Both openings have their pros and cons, but for my money, I'd put it all down on Wake Up, Get Up, Get Out There. It just feels better made, and to me, it's more striking, more memorable, and it's just more enticing. Now, if the gameplay in the early parts of the palace look wonky, it's because I'm trying to play it with one hand. Not because I lost my left, but because I have a cat named Brick sitting in my lap who's desperate for attention. Good kitty. Little shit broke my blinds, and now my neighbors can check up on me whenever they take their dogs out to poop. Which, by the way, he did it while I was recording this! I adore this opening section of the dungeon. As noted by the Phantom Thieves before you head inside the metaverse, Futaba's palace is unique in that it's the only palace thus far where the exterior is nothing at all like Tokyo, likely due to her lack of knowledge of what the city surrounding her is even like. Upon entering the palace for the first time, we find that there's a giant door blocking our path and no way through. While we turn around and try to look for another way in, Shadow Futaba approaches, offering to reward us if we take back something stolen by a bandit in the nearby village. The item she wanted back was a map of the palace the bandit was planning on using to get inside and rob her. This is then followed by both her rewarding us with the map and betraying us, the floor giving way to a pit of quicksand we only narrowly escaped from. This first challenge is fascinating to me, as not only does it allow for some neat world building in a world that's explicitly imaginary, but it was also the most fun I've had analyzing and interpreting anything in the game so far. I might be looking too deeply into this, but stick with me because my 3:22 a.m. sleep-deprived brain is freaking out over this. The immediate and most obvious aspect of this quest is what it does for Futaba. Not only does it fulfill her desire to get a group of invaders so far away from her and her tomb that we had to take the Morgana bus, but we also prevent someone else from getting inside the safe space she's created for herself. Something she ironically wouldn't have done anything to stop had we not been there. She doesn't just see us as a threat, but as a tool for her to use. While she wants us gone, she sees the benefit in manipulating our desire to help, only to then follow it up with an attempt to get rid of us permanently. Yet in spite of this, she gave us the very thing the bandit was going to use to infiltrate the palace. There's a two-facedness to Shadow Futaba that makes the various encounters with her interesting and compelling. Her hope that will help her clashes with her antisocial instincts. She doesn't want anyone or anything to get inside the tomb, yet unless there's an indirect way to do it, such as traps, puzzles, or us, she'll let it happen as she feels as though she deserves it. However, that's not the only interesting piece of characterization here for her. The other important aspect has everything to do with the town bandit. On the surface, this guy seems like nothing more than a puzzle to solve. Chase him into a dead end so he can take back the map. However, upon further thinking, I've come to the conclusion that he's so much more than that. Why is there a town in her palace? Think about it, the reason why there's nothing but a vast desert is because Futaba doesn't really know the outside world. So why is there a town here? What could Futaba know about that's outside of her house? This bandit is us. It's Joker. What is a bandit but another word for a thief? And what is the one other place Futaba would reasonably have the knowledge of, if not for LeBlanc, the place we call home? When you compare the map of the palace entrance to the map of Yoganjaya, you'll notice that the village is southeast of the tomb, the same direction her adoptive father's place of work is from her house. We got inside Futaba's tomb that night, and in the process, we stole that sense of security from her. And now we're coming back to take that treasure using the very knowledge we gained from that encounter. Of all the things to happen upon returning to this dungeon, the last thing I was expecting to fall in love with was a sequence that takes like 10 minutes at most to do. It makes it kind of a shame that it's followed up by the game blocking us off from the obvious path until we get back to the palace entrance, only to then expect you to turn around and go back down that path. Yeah, it's minor, but it's because of how inconsequential it is that I question why even have it in the first place. All it does is add 2 unnecessary minutes to the game. Both lead back to the first room of the palace, so why not just let us head straight to the button that opens that door? Beyond this opening section, the rest of the palace is just kinda great. I love the idea of constantly returning to the central stairway after opening the next big door. I love the puzzles, as for the first time, I actually felt challenged to a degree on each and every one. New story elements are introduced through the pictograph puzzles. The actual level layout is really dynamic and engaging. You occasionally hear the very voices plaguing Futaba's mind, and for the first time, I was honestly considering heading back to the real world as I was running low on supplies. I still did it all in one day, but the low fuel light had been on since the halfway point. Oh, and like I said last month, the days when my mother was there is a top tier track. Futaba's Palace is easily the best dungeon in the game so far, and is infinitely better than I remember it being. Funny how we went from my least favorite palace to my favorite. I will say, I do think it's a missed opportunity to not include a cognitive Sojiro somewhere, perhaps as a gatekeeper that just stands outside or something. During the dungeon, we find various images showing Futaba's relationship with her mother, specifically from her point of view as opposed to a third party's. However, alongside this, we learn a new piece of information. After her death, Futaba was read her mother's suicide note in which she blamed everything on her, making it perfectly clear why she blames herself. Eventually, we come to a door we just can't open. Realizing it's representative of Futaba's bedroom and how no one is allowed in, we decided to go ahead and send the calling card. This time, however, we'll be handing it to her personally, inside her room. While giving her the card, Futaba seems weirdly informed on a lot of the things we're talking about, even if she's not 100% in the know. Turns out her mother was actually studying this thing called cognitive science, which seems to be directly related to the metaverse and palaces. Futaba reads the card, Morgana scares the crap out of her, and we head back inside. With the door removed, we make our way to the top of the tomb, only to encounter not Shadow Futaba, but Cognitive Wakaba, the manifestation of how Futaba saw her mother. While we struggle to beat her back, Futaba ends up making her way inside her own palace, having had the metanav appear on her phone. When she meets up with us, the voices and visions return and she starts to have another panic attack. But what saves her isn't one of us, but her own shadow. Shadow Futaba tells her the truth about their mother, that everything Futaba thought about her wasn't true. She never abused her, she never hated her, she loved her. The only reason she blames herself is because of that suicide note that those men heartlessly read to her. She then awakens to a persona and the battle continues. The fight with Cognitive Wakaba is honestly the most underwhelming aspect of this entire story arc. The battle is split into 2 phases, with the first being fairly straightforward. Wakaba flies around the pyramid, forcing you to attack with your skills and guns, and the sequence comes to an end once she performs a diving attack. The second half starts with Futaba summoning a giant ballista, giving you the option of sending a party member to man it for 3 turns. Once it goes off, Cognitive Wakaba crashes into the pyramid, allowing you to do direct physical damage at 5 times what other attacks would do. Twice during the fight, Wakaba will ask you a question, and if you answer correctly, Futaba will repel another dive attack. That's it. The only change in Royal is that Cognitive Wakaba will start to use Megidolin if the battle goes on for too long. While I think it's probably the best boss fight so far from a narrative standpoint, from a gameplay perspective, it doesn't really feel like an actual battle to me. Not only is it just stupid easy, but the constant pauses to let Cognitive Wakaba yell what is essentially the same thing over and over again makes it feel like this fight may as well be scripted. Now would typically be where I'd talk a bit of demonology and explain what demon this boss is meant to represent, but unless I'm just missing something, Cognitive Wakaba is literally just a sphinx, and there really doesn't seem to be any deeper narrative meaning as to why. I could talk about Shadow Futaba and what demon she is, but all she is Futaba's persona, Necronomicon. I guess you could say that her being Necronomicon has a meaning, since the Book of the Dead houses the truth, much like how Shadow Futaba helps her real self come to terms with what happened. But even then, it doesn't feel as interesting as past bosses. It's more of a happy accident. I don't know. This is not as much to talk about here. Sorry.
I'll sue!
Once the fight is over, Futaba heads out, leaving us to deal with the now collapsing pyramid, narrowly escaping through Morgana's Goatsy. Back in the real world, Futaba has entered into a coma, but it's not really a coma, she's just kind of asleep for a long time. She said she'll handle Medjed for us, so I guess we just gotta wait it out for now. Anyway, time for a month to focus on Confidants. Remember how I couldn't make much progress at the beginning of this arc? Well, I'm not as bothered by it because of this. If I'm gonna make progress on these guys, now is absolutely the time. So, how'd I do? I hit ranks 4, 5, and 6 with Kawakami, ranks 4 and 5 with Makoto, ranks 6 with An, ranks 5 and 6 with Yusuke, ranks 4 and 5 with Takemi, rank 5 with Akechi, ranks 4 and 5 with the twins, rank 7 with Ryuji, and I was able to max out Kasumi and Yoshida. To be fair, Kasumi only has 5 ranks to her Confidant, so it wasn't really hard to do. As a reminder, I'll be talking about all the Confidants I do in a later video. Whether I max them out or not doesn't really matter, but for now, let's just bask in the glory of finishing 2 of them. Time to never talk to these guys ever again. Bye-bye. Now, there is still one Confidant available I still haven't started, and the reason is I was 100,000 yen short. Thankfully, after going into Mementos and solving 4 requests, as well as making it to the natural stopping point, I earned enough to buy into Chihiya's scheme. However, the next step in unlocking her Confidant is to go back into Mementos and fight a guy. Seeing as it'd be inefficient to waste a day on just 1 request, I'm gonna hold off until a second one pops up at least. It would be better use of my time this way. Something I like to note before moving on, Makoto invited me to go see a movie called Like a Dragon, quote, by that one famous director. Like a Dragon is a reference to the video game series Yakuza, or Ryuga Gotoku as it's known in Japan, or Like a Dragon as it's now known, making the name of the series a direct translation of the Japanese title. In 2007, Japanese film director Takashi Miike made a film adaptation of the first entry in the Ryuga Gotoku series. Takashi Miike is a very famous director, having one of the largest directorial portfolios that I have ever seen, with 73 movies and TV series made prior to his take on Like a Dragon, and having 112 credits as director on IMDb in his 32-year-long career. However, he has also appeared in a lot of works as well, either playing a character or simply playing himself. One such instance is in 2021's No More Heroes 3, during which Travis Touchdown asked Mr. Miike if he would make a live-action No More Heroes. In other words, Persona and No More Heroes are in the same universe, and I get to bring up No More Heroes again. God, I love Suda 51. Finally, a month passes by and we hit August 21st, the deadline set by Medjed. That morning, we talk with Sojiro and learn that he has always doubted the idea that Wakaba committed suicide. Futaba then enters LeBlanc, having gotten there with ease, much to the surprise of Sojiro. She tells us to come with her so we can finally put a stop to Medjed. While we clean her room, Futaba works away for hours. Once she finishes, she's surprised by how clean her room is and passes out. The next day, the news reports that Medjed's website has been hacked and replaced with the Phantom Thieves logo and the private information of a man who is a part of Medjed. Not only that, but the threatened attack never happened. Futaba shows up and we head upstairs to talk. Turns out the guy that she doxed was the only one who is actually antagonizing us, and the reason it was assumed to be a group effort is because many hackers claim to be a part of Medjed, despite no real connections. Futaba knows this because she was the one who first came up with the name Medjed back when she played hacker, only for random people to start claiming it for themselves, which is why she switched to Alibaba. Now with Medjed out of the way, we invite Futaba to join the Phantom Thieves and she accepts. But first, she needs to learn to be comfortable around everyone. Using the rest of summer vacation, we make plans to do just that. This is the best story arc so far. easily. It feels like the perfect mixture of Persona 5's premise and Persona 4's ideas for dungeons. Everything important to the story feels fully explored, with Futaba herself coming off as easily the most deep and layered character in the game. Not to mention, the way the story is paced is great. Compared to previous months, the story of Summer is paced very differently despite keeping the same general structure. Past story arcs told 90 to 95% of its story before you ever even stepped inside the palace. Madarame does stand out in that you have to leave the dungeon around a third of the way through so you can open a door and let Yusuke join the team, but that sequence to me always felt like an interruption. It stops whatever flow you might have had going, forcing you to leave at a frankly arbitrary point in order to continue making progress. Summer, on the other hand, is much better at pacing everything, going as far as integrating the story into the palace itself. We first start off with the basic premise and initial encounters with Futaba. While we learn about her situation and why she is the way she is, there are various dangling plot threads that are left unanswered. As we solve the pictograph puzzles inside the palace, we slowly learn more and more about Futaba's history with her mother. Up to this point, we had simply been told what had happened, but now we get to see it represented in an abstract, thematically appropriate form, specifically from Futaba's point of view as opposed to a third party's. Alongside seeing events we know about properly depicted, we even learn brand new plot information from these images that help better contextualize how Futaba ended up the way she did. Then we have the fight with Cognitive Wakaba. With previous in-palace boss fights, it was always accompanied by the emotional climax of the narrative, which was typically telling the palace owners off. This time, however, the emotional climax is directly tied to Futaba's awakening of her persona. Instead of listening to the voices in her head telling her what she is and what happened, she listens to herself. The part of her that knows the truth. Wakaba loved her. It's frankly a great moment and feels even more satisfying than holding past villains accountable. Plus, I loved how Futaba's shadow wasn't just some evil Futaba. It was very refreshing considering how this series has used shadows in the past. Now, someone might take issue with me saying everything important to this story was fully explored because the real target of the arc, Medjed, is barely touched on. They show up, make some threats, and then disappear without ever even learning the guy's name. The closest we get is learning that Medjed is some anonymous type organization where anyone can take up the name. The truth is, Medjed is not important. Okay, well, it is important in the sense that it gives the story a call to action and a timer, the latter of which is necessary to how the game as a whole is structured, but Medjed doesn't matter beyond that. What matters is Futaba and her personal story, her struggle to overcome her trauma and fear of people. I don't care about who Medjed is or why they're threatening us. I care about helping Futaba and slowly learning more and more about what happened to her and her mother, a plot that isn't even fully answered by the time Medjed is dealt with. Summer is Persona at its best, in my opinion. While it doesn't focus much on P5's core theme of rebelling against society, at least not yet anyway, it does get right to the core of what the entire Persona series is about. Helping people deal with their trauma. And for that, I absolutely love it. I'll see you guys next time for the Futaba recovery plan, as well as the introduction of a long teased character. The cat is on the desk. He's on the desk, he's messing with the mic.
Run, run, run.